I think that when there are doors that are not open to you, you have to make other doors. I was coming off almost a decade on a show where I got to play a character who was messy and flawed and finding her way, and I was looking at old films that had interesting female characters in them that might be a good jumping off point to kind of develop a series from. And I watched this old film, Black Widow, with Deborah Winger and Teresa Russell, and the skeleton of it was really interesting because the elevator pitch gets me in, right? It's a female FBI agent hunting a female serial killer. And the really interesting thing about the movie as source material was that the first half of the movie is like a traditional cat and mouse thriller, and they're kind of able to get away with moving through the world because everyone around them is underestimating them. And that to me felt like a very contemporary kernel. A lot of women have had that experience of being underestimated and having to move in different ways. And then the second half of the movie, Liz Meriwether, our creator, describes as kind of like a tone poem. It's the two women that have found their way to each other, the FBI agent and the killer, basically just sitting on a beach, talking, getting to know each other. And there's a very interesting set piece where they're scuba diving underwater, and you wonder, are they going to kill each other? Are they going to kiss? It's a kind of absurd twist for this cat and mouse thriller that starts off as such and kind of becomes something else. But I think inherently the skeleton of it felt really fascinating to me, and I was really interested in the possibility of playing a woman in law enforcement. The show is called Furious, and sure, there are a lot of things that the characters, and I think people in society, have very good reasons to be rageful about. But the show is called Furious because, inspired by Greek mythology, the Furies are these three avenging angels who kind of fly through the night sky, getting vengeance for those who can't get justice for themselves. And so I think at a time when we feel that the systems that were built to protect us and help us are maybe letting us down, it's interesting to harness these feelings of despair and see rage as power that can be harnessed and, when focused, can be maybe for good. Dynamics are complicated, and they are, for these characters, existing in all aspects of their life, personally, professionally. They are feeling like they are boxed into corners and unable to get justice for themselves, unable to be their whole selves. You can see how much they are holding it together at work, in their lives, and operating at very high levels at the same time as really living under the burden of constantly having to prove themselves, of not being able to move in the ways that they want to. And I think it makes for risk-taking characters. I think that when there are doors that are not open to you, you have to make other doors. And so it makes for good drama because we see characters who are using the fact that they're not allowed in certain rooms and not able to get justice in the way that our system promises, that make them go outside the lines of conventional justice. And so I think that as the season goes on, you see the characters making riskier and riskier choices because they don't think, they're starting to lose faith that they'll be able to get what they want the traditional ways. Well, I think it's different when you have a movie that's got a limited amount of time and when you have an 8-hour series. I think that there's the opportunity to dig much more into backstory and to understand both of these characters in full complexity, understand the histories of them and the things that have happened to them in their lives that have brought them and shaped them in the way that they have. For, in the original film, the serial killer is seemingly just doing it for money and power. And, when Liz started researching real female serials, there are very few that we know of. Not that I'm hoping there are more, but I think all of this is kind of, it is kind of very fascinating in that way, that plays upon our desire to understand why somebody would do this. So what could drive somebody to kill multiple times? And for all of the women who are serial killers, in reality that we know of, they're all victims of violence. So to start there as a very real underpinning of what happens to women when they're trafficked, when they are abused, when they have been kept and traded and hurt for many years at a time. And what if one of them decided, well, I'm going to take down the whole system that hurt me and everyone around me? Nora says it early on, the justice system wants a perfect victim, and they want a narrative that makes sense. And victims aren't perfect. And so with Alice and Catherine, you have two sides of a similar coin. You have women who are not perfect victims, women who have made mistakes, who have been hurt, but also messed up themselves and are messed up because of it. But also, I think that makes for really good drama too. So ultimately, I think the show is incredibly watchable, and there's this like invisible thread that is between these two women that existed in the first film, but in this one there's so much more kind of continuity between two people who seem to be so opposite and yet really have this kind of thread tying them together, and are both kind of so good at what they do.